Well, hi there, everyone. Welcome to Lookout's webinar, Cybersecurity Predictions for 2024, Emerging Threats and Best Practices. It's quite a mouthful. My name is Deb Wolf, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Lookout, and I'm excited to be with you today and with this great panel who will be sharing their thoughts on emerging trends, emerging threats, and what we've observed this year, and provide some best practices as we move into the new year. So this year was filled with unprecedented twists and turns in the world of cybersecurity. We've seen cyber attacks disrupting critical infrastructure, new forms of malware wreaking havoc across industries, and an increased focus on securing remote work environments. It's been a wild, wild ride. So today we're here to navigate through these recent events meant for the future and what trends we anticipate for 2024. So we have an esteemed lineup of experts. They are my colleagues. I'm happy to let them introduce themselves. They are ready to share their insights, predictions, and everything covering security protocols to emerging technologies and innovative defense strategies. So this webinar isn't just about looking back, it's definitely about gearing up for what's next. So let's dive in. Let's start with some short introductions. Aaron, do you want to introduce yourself first?
Oh, yeah. Hi, everyone. My name's Aaron Cockerell. I work at Lookout, obviously, running all of the products, and part of the security organization falls into my area. I've been in this space now for 15 years. I know that makes me seem a little old, but so I do have some experience in the space.
Awesome, thanks. Sundram.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Sundaram Lakshmanan. I'm CTO here at Lookout. I'm partner in crime with Deb and Aaron in building these great products here. I oversee product architecture and product vision. Like Aaron, I have been in this business of building networking and security products for almost 2 decades now. Thank you for having me.
Great, and DR?
Hey, I'm David Richardson, also known as DR. I am a VP of product for our endpoint and threat intel offerings. I've been with Lookout for 14 years, and I've had a variety of different roles here throughout that time.
Terrific, awesome, thanks you guys. Well, let's jump and get after it. So one of the trends we're seeing here at Lookout is that mobile devices have been the new endpoint of choice for threat actors, and that may be because they've not always had adequate protection. This year, we heard about several data breaches that started with credential theft occurring on mobile devices. And so maybe, Aaron, I'll start with you. In light of this trend, can you explain a little bit about what these attacks, how these attacks tend to take place and what you expect from them going forward?
Yeah, for sure. And so it is, I think it's worth pointing out that the tactics actually started quite some time ago, but they've been gaining momentum. So I think it was actually with Lapsus, and DR can probably keep me honest here, but we saw originally a focus on capturing or attacking socially, like social engineering, users via their mobile device first. And the reason you see attackers attacking users via their mobile device from a social engineering perspective is actually because that's where they get the most success. So if you want to trick someone into doing something that they wouldn't normally do, you send them a link on their phone or an SMS on their phone, because they're more likely to do the wrong thing on that device for many reasons, because of its user interface and a number of others that we won't go into here. The more advanced attackers that we saw this year that, say, for example, attacked Caesars, MGM, we saw them late last year attacking Twilio and Zendesk, all these styles of attack involve social engineering on the mobile device to gain access to credentials. What's a little bit unique here, a new tactic, is that they're social engineering people with large data set access. So these are IT professionals and executives that are likely to have access to data that these bad actors can use for leverage, can use to exploit the organization. So what they do is they steal these credentials by sending you text messages to say, hey, give me your credentials, or you need to log into this login page that looks almost you can't determine the difference between that login page and your own. You enter your credentials. They then quickly replay those credentials or re-enter that password, get past second factor authentication, and they're using interesting techniques to do that as well, and ultimately then gain rapid access to large data sets. And it's pretty obvious what happens from there on. They download the data and then they extort the company. So what's really important to highlight here, so it's a fairly simple chain of events. They socially engineer people with large data set access to get their credentials. They replay or enter those credentials to steal large data sets, and then they extort the company. What's important about understanding these modern tactics is, firstly, that didn't involve any malware. There was no malware involved in everything I just described. Now, arguably, you could say they weaponized a login page, but that's not something you would detect if you're looking for malicious code. Secondly, the dwell time, or the time that the bad actors have access into the infrastructure, and quite frankly, the overall time of the entire attack is exceedingly short when compared to the types of attacks that we've seen in the past that took months. So that's what we're seeing, and we're loosely referring to that at this stage as modern cyber kill chain.
So this sounds like it's well beyond your typical CEO looking for gift cards, social media or social engineering, right? We're moving well beyond that. I'm guessing, DR, you have some thoughts around what this means for organizations, enterprise organizations that are dealing with this on a day-to-day basis as well.
Yeah, I mean, what we're seeing with all of these techniques is that they evolve from stage to stage, right? So, years ago, we used to see things like mobile malware would create botnets so that they could buy up all the Justin Bieber tickets as soon as they went on sale, because they just wanted an army of IP addresses from all around the world to go complete an action like that. And then the attackers realized, wait a second, I've got devices that are walking in and out of corporate networks. They're a lot more valuable for me to, basically offer this up to the highest bidder who wants to be able to control this device that I've hacked that's, walking in and out of a specific company. And now you can sell that for, $1,000 for the access instead of 10 cents for the access to just weaponize it as part of a botnet. And you're seeing the same thing here. Deb, you mentioned, these gift card scams, right? So, you start off like these techniques started off with impersonate the CEO or impersonate your boss's boss or something like that. Try to get them to buy, a $500 gift card and send it to somebody. And then you see like they take it to the next level, right? They figure out like, wait a second, I can use these same kinds of techniques to convince someone to hop on a video conference with me. And instead, when they click on that link, it asks them to log in. It looks like their corporate login page and asks them to complete all the normal steps. And now I've stolen their credentials, by leveraging essentially the same techniques. You think it's coming from a trusted source, and but that information is all publicly available out there through LinkedIn, through Zoom Info, through breaches, et cetera. So, organizations need to think about, the fact that this is happening on mobile. It's happening in part because organizations don't have any visibility or control for the most part about what's going on those devices. You can't tell that all of your employees just got hit by a coordinated attack where they all received this same SMS campaign at the same time. And you can't tell that 12% of them clicked on the link and that 50% of those entered their credentials into the link. You have no visibility into any of that because it's happening on devices where you just don't have that level of insight. And so, organizations will increasingly need to think about this from a couple of different avenues. Obviously, there's training and education around the latest and greatest types of scams that are out there and how they're compromising corporate data. But training is about risk reduction. You're never going to reduce it to zero through training alone. They're always going to have users who are going to fall for those kinds of things. So organizations are also going to need to think about, investing in mobile device management and mobile threat defense technologies, in order to be able to protect and get visibility into these kinds of coordinated campaigns that are, increasingly targeting mid-sized to large organizations.
Actually, I had something that I wanted to add to that, Deb, that we didn't cover. I think the other thing that organizations need to think about is that we think the reason this is happening is because most of your data has now moved to the cloud. So part of the reason for this is, or part of the reason for the increase in these attacks is the number of, let's say, unpatched Windows servers sitting in someone's broom closet is decreasing, and the number of people that are using SaaS applications and cloud infrastructure is increasing, and the cloud infrastructure is better maintained, better patched in general. I won't say always, but in general. So this is actually coming not only because mobile is the successful way to target social engineering, but also because gone are or are decreasing are the days that bad actors can gain access to this large data in some unpatched broom closet server. They have to hit the cloud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna go there exactly next with Sundram, because I think this is such an important topic. But you're right, Aaron. The data isn't on this thing, right? It's up in the cloud, and so Sundram, as we turn our thoughts that way, and we think about how this modern cyber kill chain is changing the way bad actors are getting into this data. I mean, it is really about accessing those large data sets that we've moved to the cloud. So what are your thoughts on how we should be thinking about this from a cloud data protection perspective?
Exactly. Very, very good points. I really like the way, Aaron and DR kind of set the stage. The modern cyber kill chain starts with identity theft, probably on the endpoints, but then always the business end invariably is the data. And now data, as we all kind of are figuring out, data is more and more in the cloud, right? And then this kind of puts a big spin. I'll kind of, before I talk about the data protection, let me kind of just briefly touch upon what kind of data has moved into the cloud, right? Thanks to a decade of digital transformation, especially, starting with these pandemic years, ton of data has moved into the cloud, right? Like people have no visibility, just like people don't have visibility, enterprises do not have visibility on the endpoint. Enterprises also do not have visibility into the data. The data, if I have to kind of enumerate, I mean, it could be your customer data, just like in Salesforce, the CRM. It could be your employee data, health data. It could be in your Workday, success factors. It could be in your ServiceNow, and trove of backup data going into S3s and Azure blobs and buckets. The amount of data has just gone manifold into these clouds and cloud applications, right? And on top of that, here's the thing. I mean, we have to understand the data life cycle too, right? One is the data that's getting moved into the cloud, but then the data, there's more and more data that is getting generated on the cloud, getting analyzed on the cloud. The reports are getting generated, the IoT data. There's so much data that's still flowing into this. And this is what kind of brings us to this question that you asked: how do you secure these type of environments in these modern days, right? And it's not a problem with the modern enterprise. It's a problem with traditional enterprise, Fortune companies, SMBs, mid-market, all sorts of enterprise. Yeah. Now, this is where, if I have to draw an analogy, this is where I feel the fortresses are failing. The paradigm, there is a big paradigm shift going on. The concepts that we are used to, like defense in depth, a strong perimeter, best of breed security technologies, these are all just falling apart for the same reasons that Aaron and DR alluded to, right? Because there is no more, I mean, there is malware, but more and more attacks are more targeted. Identities are getting stolen, data is getting breached. That's it, right? Like there's nothing in between. There is mobile, and there is cloud, and there is endpoints and cloud. And this is where what's happening now, Deb, is these security technologies are also getting consolidated, and you do need a different type of technologies because your applications are outside your enterprise, users are outside your enterprise, right? And this is where all these security technologies are coming into the cloud. So first and foremost, what we are seeing as a trend is more and more of these security technologies are being delivered from the cloud because businesses need that agility. Second, what we are seeing is also as a trend, more and more of these technologies are integrated. So you have more coverage, you have more context, and then you have more controls. We'll talk more about the controls. Some specific examples, right? If you take the traditional technologies like VPN, which was like, widely deployed. We all know that for two generations, right? 2 decades. These are now getting replaced with technologies like ZTNA, where people want to give very granular access. That's kind of the trend I'm seeing in this space.
Terrific. All right, so I want to take just a minute and pivot to talk about something we have, the world has been taken by storm on this year, and that is AI. I don't think you can go to a conference, listen to a webinar, even open your emails these days without hearing those 2 little letters, AI, and usually it's for exciting reasons. Certainly, we wouldn't be a data protection company if we didn't think about AI and the implication of how AI-driven products like ChatGPT and Google Bard and others consume and use your data. Although AI tools can be great productivity tools and many people are wanting to jump on the bandwagon and use them, the problem can be that those platforms use the data submitted by your average employee today to train their own models. So that means anything proprietary immediately becomes public. Aaron, maybe you can talk a little bit more about how to prevent data leakage as organizations continue to adopt new technologies like ChatGPT, AI, and others.
So what I see mostly from customers that are adopting generative AI is the security professionals are challenged with their wanting to enable their company to be able to leverage generative AI from a productivity perspective, but they're equally challenged with what you highlighted, which is the fact that they have a responsibility to protect that company's data. And they're not really doing that, or the challenge is if you're submitting things like, heaven forbid, source code or customer lists and these types of things to generative AI, then all of a sudden that becomes public information. Now, it's not exactly public in that, immediately someone else can query it, but it will be incorporated naturally into the answers of other queries. So lots of the CISOs that I speak to are struggling with this challenge. And I think that the biggest reason for that is because there are so many ways that employees, especially now when they're distributed, can circumvent the way that an employer would have normally controlled that. Now, we're all, like, if you look at this picture, we're all working from home. Everyone, or so many people these days are working from home. If you're working from home and you're in the process of doing away with the VPN in the way that Sundaram talked about just a moment ago, which is very common, ZTNA alone doesn't solve the problem of how do I work out if an end user is submitting critical information, intellectual property, back up to the cloud, and especially, that means anything from submitting it to something like Google Drive or a personal Dropbox account, or to generative AI. So what we see is there is an increasing need for customers to be able to apply technologies like DLP that used to be in their perimeter into an environment where users are all connecting from home. And that's become a critical capability now that security professionals are charged with the responsibility of controlling their company's data, which, like Sundaram said before, they're struggling to even know where it's gone in the in the involvement of the cloud. Now end users are submitting it to things like generative AI. So what I see evolving over the period of the next year or two is widespread adoption of what I would refer to as intelligent, secure web gateways that are capable of determining if the data that the users are submitting or receiving, either way, interacting within the cloud, would be specified as sensitive information from a company perspective, and then being able to take action, redact it before it goes to ChatGPT or whatever it is that your company decides to do. Because ultimately, generative AI is well and truly here to stay. We can't take a head in the sand attitude to it. We need to embrace it. And the only way to do that is to actively participate in the transaction between your end users and what they're interacting with in the cloud, which is, like I say, more modern approach to a traditional on-premise secure web gateway. That's where I think we'll see most companies headed throughout this next year.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, your comments are so spot on, and none of this work, I think, with generative AI is, from an employee perspective, is malicious, right? People just aren't thinking about, wow, where could this be going, or how do I, should I even be putting this kind of information or these kinds of things into an AI-driven tool like ChatGPT, certainly. And so it's certainly not malicious. Now, on the other hand, DR, I'm going to ask you to talk about what we're seeing the bad actors and adversarially how we're seeing AI applied and how we have to stay ahead of that, right? So the other side of the coin, maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, the same AI tools that we all have access to and that enterprises are leveraging for productivity gains, they're also being exploited by bad actors. And I would say AI at its core, these generative AI tools, they want to be helpful. They're trained to make the user satisfied. They want to make the user happy, give them the answer that they're looking for, right? And yes, there are ethical guidelines that are put in place on these tools, but they can be trivially circumvented in most cases. If you ask ChatGPT to build you a phishing page, it's going to say, hey, I'm not going to do that for you. But if you ask it to build you HTML for a login page that takes a username, a password, and then an MFA token, and lets you customize the company logo and the background, it's going to do it right for you just fine. So it's trivial to kind of circumvent these things. And then there are also alternative tools like Fraud GPT that are essentially ChatGPT without ethical guidelines, where you can literally say, give me a text message that impersonates the CEO of a company that would compel a director of finance to want to respond immediately without seeming too suspicious. And okay, it'll think it through and it'll say, hey, what about this kind of message or that kind of message? Or suggest homoglyph attacks or like lookalike domains that I could register to go attack this organization. Just give you a list of, yeah, this one would look pretty good. And perhaps many people would fall for it. And so, I think it's important that organizations, adopt AI in this kind of security arms race, because otherwise you're just going to fall behind. It's going to be crucial that we are all, as both as security providers, but also as individual organizations trying to protect our employee and customer data, that we all adopt these tools in order to be able to stay ahead of the attackers, because for sure they're going to adopt these tools to be able to move faster, more effectively, more efficiently.
Yeah.
That sounds like using AI to solve AI problems. So, Norm, I don't know, maybe you have some thoughts on that.
No, well said. I mean, great points that Aaron and DR made. And what you said is, at the core of it, I mean, intelligence is the limit of intelligence, right? Like, let's put it the other way, right? Yeah, actually, AI, see, the thing is, we had been in the security industry as such, in which we all have been part of for, well over 2 decades. We have been adopting technologies, but definitely this is a big inflection point where we'll start using Gen AI, like we are already using, and I'll explain how we are using it. But before I do that, let me kind of touch on 2 points. There are 2 types of AI algorithms, the predictive algorithms and the generative algorithms. Most of the industry has been using predictive algorithms for a while, and for a simple reason. I mean, we are all used to hearing about alert fatigues. I mean, there are so much noise in enterprise systems that we have been used to hearing, starting with the SIEM and incident response and SOAR and whatnot. And we have been automating and automating and automating. We all know in this industry that it's not going to be easy and for a human intervention to act just in time, right? Like the breaches and the threats are enormous, ginormous. It's like, we have to build a Great Wall of China, and the attackers just have to find a small hole in that, right? Like, and that's kind of the imbalance in this attack surface. Given that AI has to be put to use, we have been using predictive algorithms. Where the predictive algorithms shine is in the detection phase of this attack, right? For example, behavioral anomalies. That's a very well-known problem. We profile the users, we deep learn how their behaviors are over a period, and then predict when there is an anomaly and flag that. But where generative AI comes in is it comes into the much more into the human part of the business, which is more involving. It needs more security expertise, and that's where the Gen AI can turn the balance, tilt the balance in our favor in terms of hunting, threat incident responses, explainability, right? This is where this generation becomes such a powerful solution. So we are putting all of that to use. It's not an exaggeration if we say this is the year of generative AI, and I feel like the next few years is going to be like that. We'll see more. Right?
That's it.
An AI model there just thought that you were giving us a thumbs up.
Yeah. Exactly. Love it.
Yeah.
Other security predictions or trends for 2024. Other things you guys are hearing, seeing that you're keeping an eye on. Aaron?
Yeah, the thing that I see increasingly adopted well, it increased a lot last year, but I see it really taking off this year, is the adoption of cybersecurity insurance policies. In fact, I don't know if it'll necessarily happen here in the United States. By the way, my accent's Australian, but I live in the US. I expect that in many countries around the world, we may even see regulatory compliance necessitate the need for cybersecurity insurance where things like personal data or health data are concerned. But at the very least, we'll see far more widespread adoption of cybersecurity insurance. And what's interesting to me there is the insurance companies want to make sure, because they're putting an investment or as a hedge, if you like, they want to make sure that the companies that they're insuring have the appropriate software and protections in place to avoid having a breach. So they're both trying to avoid having a breach, maybe for different reasons. But the point is that cybersecurity insurance companies, and I would argue even then probably managed security service providers, will increasingly define the requirements for companies for their cybersecurity strategies. So, and one of the areas, given the number of successful social engineering attacks that have resulted in recent breaches, and the fact that we've seen large data sets stolen without any intervention through insider type detection techniques, I believe that these types of technologies, specifically social engineering on mobile devices, and the ability to detect large data set movement that should not be happening, anomalous large data set movement, are things that increasingly cybersecurity insurance vendors and MSSPs will deem required for a cybersecurity insurance policy.
Great. DR, how about you?
So there's I would say an interesting and disturbing trend that we're seeing in terms of the way that some threat actors are beginning to operate. So we're seeing an escalation of techniques to sort of threats of physical violence. And this is similar to, like we were talking about earlier, how like these scams, like they evolve over time. So we saw in the early days of like phone theft, when your iPhone would get stolen and there was activation lock in place, that you would get a text message that would essentially say like, hey, I took this phone to the Apple store and they told me to reach out to you to get it unlocked. I bought it for my sick grandmother or sick child or something like that. Can you please help me out? It would be like sob story, and then maybe it would be like, this is the FBI and we found something on your device and we need you to unlock it for us. And then finally it would be like, we know where you live, we know who you are, we will come to your house and we will hurt you if you don't unlock this device. So they would pivot through these kinds of techniques just to try to get you to basically unlock your device so that it could be resold to somebody after your device was stolen. So now we're seeing those kinds of trends make their way into enterprise data theft too. So we have seen, for example, Scattered Spider use techniques like, basically instead of creating a fancy crafted phishing page, they'll literally say, give me the admin password to Okta because in the next 30 minutes, or I will hurt so-and-so. And like, they know your spouse's name or your kids' names. They know the address that you live at. And they say, don't tell IT, we'll know if you tell them. And they'll follow up, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, 5 minutes, just send it over to me. It's a very scary thing. And, for the most part, like for all of the known instances, we believe that they're collecting data from breaches and from publicly available data sets to launch these kinds of threats of physical violence. But, you can unfortunately see this sort of escalate, over time to perhaps, acts of real violence. And, you just think about how easy it is these days with how like digitally connected the whole world is. Like, how hard would it be to send an Uber to someone's house and say that you're, in a Toyota Prius right now, sitting outside their house or whatever, like these are things that they're just unfortunately easy natural extensions these days to just like play up the hype and, convince somebody to do something that, clearly they know that they shouldn't do. But, when push comes to shove, it's sort of like, what advice do you give to someone who's being carjacked at gunpoint? It's like, hand over the keys to your car, right? And, unfortunately, these techniques are working. And, that's why we see, bad actors increasingly start to leverage these kinds of techniques. So I think organizations need to be aware, employees need to be aware of these kinds of techniques, and also aware of what data is available about them on the dark web and through publicly available sources like social media, so that they can protect themselves and their organizations from these kinds of attacks.
That's a scary thought indeed.
It is. Sundram, anything to add on your end?
Yeah. Huh? What is
After
that?
all that, I know, after where DR left us, geez.
I know, I'm all alert. I'm thinking, what product should we be building for that? Yeah, but in terms of being a little closer to home, I'm seeing a couple of trends, right? Maybe DR and Aaron can vouch that. Well, one of the short-term trends we are seeing is a lot of these legacy best-of-breed security technologies are getting consolidated actually in the cloud. They're getting replaced on-prem, right? Because the businesses this is the decade where we would be talking more and more about productivity and security, not productivity versus security, right? The security has to become more agile, and cloud is the right way to do that, and more coverage, and cloud again is the right way to do that in an integrated fashion, right? A perfect example is technologies like virtual private networks, technologies like secure web gateways that used to secure internet access for the enterprise users. Technologies like DLP, Aaron gave some perfect examples how people download from here, upload there, and cause all these data leaks. All these things are getting consolidated in something like what we are building, which is called the SASE, or the Secure Access Service Edge platform. That's one trend we are seeing. Legacy technologies, on-prem technologies getting replaced, and I think this is going to accelerate in the cloud. Yeah. The second thing is more and more the bridge between security and application, is going to get shorter and shorter. A perfect example is like what we went through in terms of using Gen AI to solve AI problems, right? Security solutions will match the productivity gains of a SaaS application or an application in the cloud, right? Open source helped, Cloud helped. Now AI is going to help, and the security products are really innovating more and more these days, and they're going to match the product innovation as well. These are the true trends I'm seeing from the product building side. Yep.
Fascinating. It's going to get, I'm sure, another wild ride into 2024. Aaron, did you have one more thing you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think an extension of what Sundaram suggested, which is spot on, is because of the consolidation and the pace of what we have to do from a defense perspective, it's going to result in the automation type of model that he was talking about. And I think that the other aspect of that is the fact that security professionals now recognize that these attacks are happening so quickly. The only way that you can respond is through automation. And we're finally at a point where people like CEOs and board of director type people now understand that maybe losing access to your email for half an hour is justified if it stops a breach in terms of the company's data. So previously as security professionals, we were never allowed to, for example, cut off the CEO's email. Now, I think we're actually expected to do so in an automated fashion, as little as possible, to stop a breach. So automation, I think, will be key.
Excellent.
Well, that is probably a great place for us to close out. I want to thank you guys for joining me and being a part of the panel today. It was a great session. To our audience, if you're unsure how secure your enterprise data is, we encourage you to take our data risk assessment. It's linked below, and the 5-minute quiz will give you insight into security gaps within your own organization, as well as recommendations to improve your posture and some insights and next steps. You can also visit us at lookout.com if you have any specific questions or want a hands-on demo. On behalf of our panel, thanks so much for joining us. Here's to a great and safe 2024, even if it's a crazy wild ride. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.